Hello and welcome to the Thursday show. I'll be hosting a Hangout tonight at 8 p.m. Plenty to talk about. Hope to see you there. If you're a paid subscriber, you'll get an email with a link to the Hangout. If you're not, sign up now. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Joining me today, the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall, coming up. Great conversation. I always learn a lot from him. I talk to him every week or every other week at least. And we talked yesterday. You can watch it on youtube.com/standup with Pete, or you can jump to 34 minutes and listen to it right now if you want to skip the news, headlines, and clips. But I hope you don't. I'm glad to have you here for it because there is a lot to talk about. Of course, overnight there was a horrific shooting, double murder in Washington, D.C. of two young Israeli staffers who were set to be engaged to be married. They were murdered, shot dead outside D.C.'s Capitol Jewish Museum. The gunman shouting "Free Palestine" as he was arrested. So details follow on that, but just an absolutely horrific, grisly murder there. And around the country, security up in Jewish communities, synagogues, etc. The other big story, of course, yesterday was the South African president visiting and getting the Zelensky treatment in the Oval Office. Absolutely embarrassing, humiliating, horrific. Drove a lot of the news yesterday. But even with those two giant, massive, awful events, obviously the murder, horrific, but the issue that will affect more of us than any other is the Republicans' efforts to pass the, quote, big, beautiful bill, which is actually a big billionaires bill, in the middle of the night, actually, marking it up between, overnight. I'm not sure exactly where they're at here early on Thursday morning, but that's the big news. Heather Cox Richardson says the center of the law is indeed related to money. It is the $3.8 trillion extension of Trump's 2017 tax cuts, which disproportionately benefit the wealthy and corporations. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said that Americans in the lowest tenth of earners will lose money under the measure, while people in the top 5% of earners will see a tax cut of $117.2 billion. More than 20% of the tax cuts in the bill go to the top 5% of earners. Poor Americans take a hit from the bill because it cuts federal health care and food assistance programs to partially offset the costs for tax cuts. That's right. They're cutting food assistance to give rich people more money. Take from the poor, give to the rich. Reverse Robin Hood, that's what this bill is. Cuts to Medicaid, also expected to leave at least 9 million people without health care coverage. Cuts of about 30% of supplemental nutritional assistance programs would be the biggest cut in the program's history. They would cut about $300 billion from the program through 2034. More than 40 million people, including children, seniors, and adults with disabilities, receive food assistance. And the CBO reported the measure will add $2.3 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. And get this, a new detail, according to the CPO, it would trigger cuts to Medicare, not Medicaid, but Medicare. The CBO explains those cuts would be about 4%, but would total still about $490 billion from 27 to 2034. Tobias Burns of TheHill.com summed it up by saying Republicans' tax and spending cut bill will take from the poor and give to the rich. That's right. In 2025, the Republicans' signature bill redistributes wealth from the poorest Americans to the richest. And knowing the provisions in the bill will be enormously unpopular, Republicans have been jamming it through, often literally in the middle of the night, as quickly as they could. I've got several clips coming up from Democrats describing more about it, but let's get to just a few of the other headlines I want to mention. Obviously, you probably are caught up on what happened yesterday in the Oval Office with the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. I believe I'm saying his name right. Cyril Ramaphosa. I mean, he did his best. He even brought rich white golfers to tell Trump that what he was saying was completely untrue. His claims of a white genocide. It was horrific. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. I'm not going to play any clips or talk much about it because I feel like it's getting too much coverage, and I'm not sure how you decide. I only say that because I'm worried that there's not enough coverage given to the bill that they're trying to pass in the middle of the night. But I think one of the best points I've seen made about what happened in the Oval Office yesterday is whether or not and what this means for the future of other foreign leaders' negotiations, much less ever entering that office and sitting next to him and on camera because he's doing his reality show right there for all of us. Embarrassing, humiliating, and absolutely infuriating every day, this guy and everybody supporting him. Moving on, a federal judge in Boston said yesterday that the Trump administration had violated a court order by giving a group of 8 migrants little more than 24 hours notice before deporting them to a country that most of them were not even from. Think about that. Lawyers for the migrants said the men had been told they were being sent to South Sudan, a violence-plagued country that the U.S. advises against even visiting. For now, their flight landed in the East African nation Djibouti. I mean, this is insane. A judge, a Biden appointee, said the short notice was plainly insufficient in allowing the men an opportunity to object to their removal. One of the strongest judicial rebukes the administration's face, he asked for a list of names of people involved so he could notify them that they might face criminal contempt penalties. So I guess the stakes are escalating from federal judges around the country. Justice Department ended oversight of local police in several cities. How about that? Yesterday, the Trump administration said it was planning to abandon efforts to force police reforms in several cities, including Minneapolis and Louisville, Kentucky. The cities had agreed to these reforms after incidents of police violence. So this is pretty bad news as well. Let's see. Other news from Washington. The Pentagon officially accepted the luxury jet from Qatari government. Well, that happened pretty fast. So we have it? Where is it? What's being done to it? I want to know. A judge ruled that Trump's firings of independent civil liberties watchdog board members was illegal. I wonder what's next with that story. The Pope called for humanitarian aid to be allowed into Gaza. And Congressman Gerald Connolly, the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, died. He died yesterday, 75 years old, weeks after announcing he planned to retire, and even more weeks after there was a fight whether he or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should lead the Oversight Committee for Democrats. It's pretty bad. Sad news for Jerry Connolly and his family, but just more obvious malpractice from Democrats in leadership who've got to go. After 3 years of intense negotiations, the World Health Organization on Tuesday adopted the world's first agreement on how to cooperate and respond to future pandemics. But you know whose support they didn't have? Ours. Yep, no support from the United States for the World Health Organization on that, of course. The judge in the case of the Newark mayor, Baraka, seemed pretty upset. The federal judge on Wednesday scolded federal prosecutors and announced he will dismiss trespassing charges against the Newark mayor related to a standoff at a migrant detention center. The interim U.S. attorney for New Jersey, Alina Habba, announced earlier this week she would drop charges against Baraka, but at the same time announced new charges against Congresswoman LaMonica McIver stemming from a scuffle during Baraka's arrest. Well, federal magistrate Judge Andre Espinosa reprimanded the federal prosecutors for more than 5 minutes, calling the retraction of the charges embarrassing. Our tiny Matt King, he keeps threatening sanctions on Russia, but never follows through with new sanctions. Well, without waiting for Washington, the European Union and the UK announced a new raft of sanctions against Russia, less than 24 hours after Trump and his good friend, Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, exchanged a really nice 2-hour fruitless conversation where Trump got rope-a-doped and duped by his frat brother, Vladimir Putin. And finally, fears of a global government borrowing glut likely to be compounded by this stupid billionaires bill that Republicans are passing in the middle of the night helped fuel an unusually weak auction for U.S. government bonds that send markets into a tailspin yesterday. And those are the headlines that I've got for you. None of them were very good. All of them were distressing. So I encourage you to take a cleansing breath right now before I get to the clips. Think about the good things in your life and what, if anything, you feel purposeful in doing to change any of the stories that you just heard. I'm very gratified that we won a Board of Education seat on Tuesday night. Thanks to everybody who reached out yesterday. I told that news at the beginning of yesterday's show. A lot of you reached out and sent nice thoughts, and I'm very grateful. That's one of the things I felt like I could have a little effect in. I didn't do nearly enough, but I'm relieved that we won that seat. It's a real big deal. Congratulations to my good friend, the very admirable John Maltby, who won that seat, and his wife Tina, who is just always instrumental and supportive and just an awesome leader. And I would follow her and John anywhere. I hope you have friends like that locally that run for office, that stand up to bullies, and that you can be in solidarity with, because that's the kind of thing that brings me purpose and joy during these really dark, depressing times for our country and our communities, many of our communities. So, all right, let's get to those clips that I've got for you. I think I'm just going to start with a litany of different Democrats talking about and criticizing Republicans who want to take from the poor and give to the rich and add trillions to the deficit because they don't actually care about deficit as long as they are taking money from blue states and putting it in pockets of those in red states. They're also defunding their own states, people, as well. They're hurting all of the people on the lower end of the income and the middle as well. I mean, we all lose in this cut unless you're really wealthy and you get a tax cut. And even if it's you still lose. I mean, you still lose other benefits. And when your neighbors lose, you lose because we're all connected. Anyway, here are the Democrats that I mentioned shitting all over this all day and all night.
13.7 million Americans. 13.7 million Americans are the number of people in this country whose health care are going to be stripped in this bill. Now, Republicans are going to try to tell you every single distraction in the book from that essential number. I want people at home to understand that Medicaid and the federal matching funds for Medicaid can make up 30 to 40% of some of the state budgets that we have going on back in your home. Republicans have put this bill together, rushed it together in a matter of hours on the back of a napkin, shaking it, walking out of the White House, and brought it right here to this floor. They are defunding Planned Parenthood. They are ending tons of Medicaid coverage for 13.7 million Americans, including Affordable Care Act coverage as well. And if you want to get an abortion and have a silver plan on a health care plan that you paid for, you will also be affected by this legislation as well. Also, allowing suppressors on guns to be deregulated to some of the largest amounts that we have seen since the 1930s. This is just a Christmas bill. It's a Christmas tree.
I yield the gentlelady to 30 seconds.
And so I want people to understand, for my Republican colleagues who assure what is in and not in this bill, in this process that has been this rushed, when you wake up in the morning, you will realize that you voted to defund Planned Parenthood and to take away health care from 13.7 million Americans. And when this country wakes up in the morning, there will be consequences to pay for this, and I yield back.
All right, that was AOC, of course. Here's Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania, I think.
We just verified with the Congressional Budget Office, and of the 13.7 million Americans who will lose their health care because of their bill, exactly 0 are undocumented immigrants. So the complete artifice that the other side is attempting to convince you is that almost 14 million Americans will lose their health care, but don't worry about it. They're all illegals. They're all people who are defrauding the system. It's completely false, and every independent source has verified that it is false.
All right, that's Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania's 2nd District. Here is Texas Democrat Lloyd Doggett.
Breaking yet another promise. Republicans are cutting Medicare by $500 billion. On October 1st of this year, every Medicare health care provider will see a 4% cut, and that will occur year after year after year as seniors try to find someone who will accept Medicare. And on January the 1st, millions of Americans who rely on the Affordable Care Act lose their access to a family physician. Medicaid for those in nursing homes, for half the babies born in my hometown of Austin, cut. Almost 14 million Americans losing their access to health care. And the new Trump school voucher sabotage plan, atop state vouchers, incentivizes removing students from public schools. Meanwhile, our national debt soaring by trillions from Republicans who talk fiscal responsibility, but serving their cult leader. The deficit hawks have become chicken hawks tonight. In submission to Trump, the self-described king of debt, all to reward billionaires with even more tax breaks.
Lloyd Doggett wrapping it up. Now, here, this clip starts with a Republican, and then you get a quick, witty response from Democrat James McGovern, who we love.
See, Rome is burning, and it doesn't seem as though people realize that.
Mr. Speaker, one of the previous Republican speakers got up and said Rome is burning. I hate to tell him, but Republicans are in charge. And Trump is your Caesar.
Oh, what a clapback. Whoo! What a burn. Let's get more from the great James McGovern of Massachusetts' 2nd District.
That's the Republican agenda. That's what you guys think is big and beautiful. Greed, corruption, and tax breaks for billionaires. You know, my state of Massachusetts funds states like Indiana, where the gentlelady is from. We get back less than we give. And so how dare she or anybody else vote to steal our tax money and give it to billionaires? So no, we will not go quietly. And no, we will not give up. We will fight this cruel, corrupt, immoral bill every step of the way because the people we represent are counting on us. And we will never stop fighting for them. I urge every member of this House to vote hell no, never, absolutely not on this terrible disgrace of a bill. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentlelady from Indiana.
All right. That was House speeches. That was early this morning, like 3, 4, 5 in the morning. I think most of those were taking place. Let's go to a clip again from Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. Here he is on MSNBC last night. Started with Chris Hayes' question.
My feeling here is the strategy is the too big to fail strategy, right? You got one bill, you've got the president's whole agenda, rises or falls on it. Will you, are you really going to submarine Donald Trump and they're going to try to push it to the floor? What's your understanding of where we are in this process?
This is the entirety of the Republican agenda, not just for this year, not just for this term in Congress, but this term of Donald Trump's presidency. Yeah. Because what else do they have other than fight woke? They really have no other agenda than this. So I think the pressure on them to pass this will be enormous. I have seen time and time again House Republican members saying they're in no at the outset, and then suddenly they get a tap on the shoulder. They're dragged out of the House floor and back into the Republican members' cloakroom, and they're handed a cell phone, and it's Donald Trump literally yelling at them and cursing at them. I tend to think that history will repeat itself, and that one way or the other they'll be able to get the votes. I hope I'm wrong. I pray that I'm wrong. I'm going to fight like hell to make sure this awful policy doesn't become law. But I've just seen them fold too many times before to believe that they won't fold again this time.
All right, there you go. Now let's listen to Elizabeth Warren, who made and posted this video on social media.
In the dead of night, Republicans moved along their big, beautiful bill. And that's the Republican way. They schedule their first vote for 10:30 on a Sunday night, and the follow-up vote is for 1 a.m. on a Wednesday. Why those times? Because they don't want anyone to see it. Because here's the basics of the bill. It says that there's going to be a cut to health care for about 14 million people. And that's mostly going to be little babies who need their health care. It's going to be brand new mamas. It's going to be people who've lost their jobs and need health care. It's going to be some seniors and people living in nursing homes. Cut health care for 14 million people in this country. And why? In order to produce tax giveaways for a handful of billionaires. You get the idea, so that Jeff Bezos can buy a third yacht, or Mark Zuckerberg can do another party where he dresses up and dances around to entertain people. Ugh. But that's the bottom line here. What the Republicans are trying to do is take away from those who need it to give it to their besties, and that is a handful of billionaires. So look, if that makes you just really feel pretty furious about it, don't just be furious, do something about it. You got the chance right now. This is not over. This is the moment. Call your rep, text your rep, email your rep. Get in touch with your rep, and if you do it once, do it a second time, and do it a third time, because saving health care for 14 million people is worth you're making a few calls and sending a few texts. This is our chance to tell Democrats, independents, and Republicans in the House of Representatives that you're on to them. You weren't fooled by a vote in the middle of the night. You understand what's at stake here, and you do not want our government to cut health care for 14 million people just so that a handful of billionaires get even richer.
Are you getting the message yet? Here is Pete Buttigieg, who made a video and posted it to social as well.
Well, the president was with congressional Republicans today. They are working on a major piece of legislation. And here's 3 of the things that it would do. 1, add trillions of dollars to the national debt. 2, cut taxes for the wealthy. And 3, kick millions of Americans off of Medicaid. So this is a good time to reach out to your member of Congress and ask them if they're going to keep the promises that they made earlier this year not to cut Medicaid. This bill is bad policy no matter which part of the political spectrum you come from. Most conservatives I know hate the idea of adding trillions of dollars to the national debt. Most liberals I know are especially troubled by the idea of more tax cuts for the wealthy. And most Americans I know understand that kicking millions of people in this country off their health care is just wrong. Our country can do so much better. And it starts by demanding that this Congress put together a budget that actually reflects the values of the American people.
Here's Congresswoman Angie Craig of Minnesota making a video and posted on social media out in front of the Capitol.
Hey, Minnesota, it's Congresswoman Angie Craig here. Republicans have called a Rules Committee hearing for in the middle of the night to debate the terrible bill that's going to cut Medicaid and SNAP benefits from Minnesotans. In fact, they've called the hearing from 1 to 5 a.m., and it looks like I'll be testifying about 3 a.m. this morning. But I'm happy to get up and work the overnight shift on behalf of Minnesota any day of the week if we can push back and make sure that everybody knows just how terrible this big, not so beautiful bill really is.
All right. Well, here's one Republican. It's Senator Ron Johnson being honest about the debt that this is going to create. For about 38 seconds, Ron Johnson, the Christian nationalist conspiracy theorist senator from Wisconsin on some right-wing media podcast.
If you really look at it, look at the numbers, and I look at the numbers, we will actually increase the deficit over the next 10 years, going from right now $37 trillion in debt. CBO says we'll be at 59. My guess we'd probably increase that by about $4 trillion with the big new deal, or the big beautiful bill. That puts us at $62 to $63 trillion. Again, you have to be honest. And by the way, I know Buck at the end of the show, or I think you might have asked me this last time. Well, what are you going to cut? It's impossible to say. Medicaid absolutely have to go after that. But what you need is a process. If you really look at it, look at the numbers, and I look at the numbers. We will actually increase the deficit over the next 10 years, going from right now $37 trillion in debt. CBO says we'll be at 59. My guess we'd probably increase that by about $4 trillion with the big new deal, or the big beautiful bill. That puts us at $62 to $63 trillion. Again, you have to be honest. And by the way, I know Buck at the end of the show, or I think you might have asked me this last time. Well, what are you going to cut? It's impossible to say, Medicaid absolutely have to go after that. But what you need is a process.
All right, there you go. Ron Johnson admitting the debt and deficit that it's going to add. And now here's Jimmy Kimmel last night back on ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live. He just became a grandfather. Congratulations, Jimmy. Here he is with jokes about the bill.
President Trump, who was barnstorming the Capitol today to give what he described as a pep talk in an attempt to cajole House Republicans into voting yea on his bigly spending bill. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says this bill will explode the deficit by trillions of dollars while also transferring huge amounts of money to the wealthy and kicking around 7 million people off their health care. It'll take food out of the mouths of millions of hungry children who get SNAP benefits. And it contains a provision to eliminate a sales tax on gun silencers. It will make what they call suppressors more affordable, to which I say it's about time. One thing I think we can all agree on is that the gun violence in this country is too loud. It's all so crazy. Their solution to climate change is to fire everyone who studies climate change. It's not happening if we can't see it, right? And there's no gun violence if we can't hear the shots. Trump was joined today by Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, who always looks like a little boy whose dad's yelling at the waitress. They're trying to get Republicans to fall in line with what he keeps calling his big, beautiful bill. And now he somehow has got all the dummies around him calling it that, too.
One big, beautiful bill.
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 Big, beautiful bill.
Big, beautiful bill.
Big, beautiful bill.
Big Beautiful Bill would be a good wrestling name, right? Big Beautiful Bill. The other big event of...
And there you go. I also love this from Chris Hayes last night on All In. He opened his show with a really well thought out monologue. As always, I think he's one of the best commentators out there, certainly in all of the corporate and mainstream media, but I think he crosses over to all of it. I put him up there. Here it is.
They're successfully campaigning on not cutting Medicare. It looks like Donald Trump is poised to, guessed it, cut Medicare. It is part of his so-called one big beautiful bill, which House Republicans are scrambling to get over the finish line tonight or the wee hours of the morning. We don't know. Because it looks like if they vote tonight, it will happen in the middle of the night. They worked through last night with marathon hearings beginning at 1 a.m. so they can rush the whole thing through Congress before anyone really can get their arms around what exactly they're doing. What they're doing is really unpopular. And this is the dirty little secret about Republican majorities in Congress, including this one. The core policy commitment is an upward redistribution of wealth away from everyday folks, working class, middle class people, towards the very richest Americans and enormous corporations. And I'm not saying this is like some sloganeering. It's just the record. When Republicans are in power, whether they are named Donald Trump or not, this is the one thing they always do.
Absolutely dead on. So well said. Very important. And share that message and all of this with your friends. And I'm not done. Let's stay at MSNBC. I was watching yesterday and thought this is pretty powerful. I got to give her credit when she deserves it. Nicole Wallace on MSNBC, regardless of her past, she says some pretty bold, brave things when it comes to, especially when it comes to race. I noticed she's really thoughtful and sensitive more about it. I'm sure you'll now find a clip of her being insensitive about it. But I think she does a lot of good work on that show for a couple of hours. And this is how she opened her show shortly after that embarrassing time in the Oval Office with another world leader, this time the president of South Africa. This is how she started her show around 4 p.m. yesterday.
Another day for the history books today from Donald J. Trump. An astonishing display from him in the White House today. Donald Trump meeting with the president of South Africa and attempting to ambush and humiliate that leader inside the Oval Office. But what he did instead was embarrass and humiliate the people of the United States of America again. In his meeting with President Ramaphosa, Trump peddled unsubstantiated claims of genocide in South Africa of white South Africans, a group that ruled during apartheid in South Africa. It is a fringe conspiracy theory pushed by the likes of Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, and David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the KKK.
Well, how about that for a list of fine folks to be in party with? And here's Ronnie Chang, who was in the anchor chair last night at The Daily Show.
Things off with President Trump's meeting with the president of South Africa today. And because it's Donald Trump, things got weird.
Death, 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 horrible death, death, I don't know.
What a host. Death, death. Hey, do you want a Diet Coke? Yeah. Death, horrible death. Now, the reason Trump turned this White House event into a murder podcast is that Trump is convinced that there is a white genocide going on in South Africa, which of course means there is no white genocide happening in South Africa. It's not even mathematically possible. I mean, you'll never run out of white South Africans when one of them is making 5,000 kids a week. But still, Trump thinks there is one, and you know he cares about it because he said white genocide. It's like someone told him, hey, it's not just a genocide, it's a white genocide, you know, the bad kind. And Trump's like, oh shit, get him in. But don't worry, South African president, there's a way out of this. Qatar got Trump a plane. What sweet, sweet bribe did you bring him?
I brought you a really fantastic golf book. Weighs 14 kilograms. And it showcases the golf courses in our country.
Yeah, you that up. You lost Trump at book, and you definitely lost him at kilograms. If you really want to impress Trump, you should have given him one of your golf courses. Then Trump would be like, hell yeah. Sorry, white South Africans, if that's even a real thing. Thoughts and prayers.
Welcome, my friends and neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. America, to The Late Show. I'm your host, Stephen Colbert. Folks, every so often, I'm firm, but I'm fair, and every so often, I just got to take a look at myself in the mirror, just take myself to task for being too focused on all the bad stuff that Donald Trump does. Because when I do that, sometimes I miss out on all the important things in life, like all the terrible stuff they're doing in Congress. Right now, Trump's little Republican buddies are on Capitol Hill trying to trying to figure out something else, but they're coming close to fisticuffs over his heartless tax cut and boondoggle, which he's been calling his big, beautiful bill. It really sounds less like legislation and more like the husky guy at a male strip club. Okay, ladies, coming up on the main stage is Big, Beautiful Bill. You know him, you love him, the dad bod Adonis. He's going to eat a whole pot pie with his bare hands. Grab onto those handles, ladies, before he runs off to Home Depot. The bill has some real bad goodies in it. It not only adds over $3 trillion in debt, it cuts so much Medicaid that 7.6 million Americans would lose their health insurance, but Speaker Johnson is ramming it through with a self-imposed deadline of Memorial Day. The Republican majority is so thin at this point that Speaker Johnson can afford to lose only 3 votes to pass the big, beautiful bill and keep his lips on Trump's big, beautiful badonkadonk. The thing is, the GOP can't agree on what should be in it. For example, one GOP rep insisted the bill should include steep cuts to Medicaid, but his colleague pledged to tank any bill that reduced Medicaid. Those two guys, Chip Roy of Texas and Andrew Garbarino of New York. Those are 2 of the most home state name guys I have ever heard. You'll never get them to agree, let alone caucus with Louisiana's Raganasho Hawanananao. Middle name, Hayuala. Today, Trump went to Capitol Hill and met with Republicans behind closed doors to tongue lash them into supporting his bill. He took a moment to praise Speaker Johnson and the chair of the House GOP caucus.
We have a very, very united party. This man has done a fantastic job, and so have you, Lisa.
Yes, it's true. Mike Johnson is amazing, and so are you, Lisa. Everyone look at what a great job I did recognizing this woman. You're that woman, Lisa. I even remembered her name. Whatever it was, it's Lisa now. As a result of Trump's famous art of the dealing, the two sides are more dug in than ever. But, you know, there's always going to be a lot of digging when you're dealing with a hole. We're learning.
Yeah, there you go. Stephen Colbert last night. We love it. That was good. Good stuff. All of it. And I put a lot of work into it. So if you like it, send more money to patreon.com/Pete Dominick so we can keep it going. Or send some money if you're not a subscriber. Much appreciated. All of it. Hope to see you at tonight's Hangout to talk about all of these news headlines and so much more. But now it's time to get to my conversation with Eric Segall. He's a professional expert. He's a legal scholar, specifically when it comes to constitutional law. At Georgia State University, he's written 2 books on the subject. He's been prescient on what would happen. And he is also the host of a podcast, Supreme Myths, currently on hiatus. I'm trying to get him to bring it back right here on the StandUp network that I'm creating, I guess. And, well, here's our conversation from yesterday. You can watch it on YouTube at Stand Up with Pete, and you can hear it right now. It's time for the Legal Eagle, Eric Segall. There he is, the Legal Eagle, joining me live, and you're under the weather. We want to warn people. Do you want to read the text that you sent me, or can I read what you sent me about what you sound like?
Sure. It's a reference younger people will not get, but I think your audience will. Uh-oh. I shouldn't have said that.
You said, warning, I have a cold and I sound a little like Deborah Winger.
A little bit. A male Deborah Winger, maybe.
I'm sorry you're under the weather. I appreciate you joining me. I appreciate you going live with me. I know that means you have to hold back in ways you don't normally.
No thunder. Sorry. Go ahead.
All right. What do we have to talk about? There's a few issues that I obviously want to ask you about, but just in terms of the Supreme Court arguments that have been heard since the last time that we talked, I've almost lost track, but there's also been some decisions. What do you want to say about what's transpired?
I want to talk about something that happened yesterday that the media is not really reporting on. It's a headline here and there. Sorry, Pete. But no one is really reporting on it, which is that some Maine legislator made some very terrible anti-trans comments. The Maine legislature then censored her and penalized her and punished her in ways authorized by Maine law and Maine statutes, which I think might have been a First Amendment violation. So I'm not discussing whether the legislature was correct in saying this person couldn't vote anymore because of the things she said. But what's weird is she made an emergency motion to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court granted it and told the state of Maine, the legislature, you're not allowed to apply your rules to this person this way, even before the case is heard in the lower courts. This thing the Supreme Court is doing, Pete, of intervening in lower court cases as, unquote, an emergency basis on a regular basis now is really terrible. And I want folks to think about the states' rights aspects of all of this, right? The legislature says what you said is terrible and horrible and disqualifies you under our rules. We're going to suspend you until we figure this out. That she files a lawsuit, which is fine. She might win that lawsuit. Maybe she should. I'm not taking a position on the merits, Pete. But that lawsuit doesn't belong in the Supreme Court of the United States. It belongs in lower courts like all other suits. The reason the court did this, obviously, is this is a case about political correctness and trans rights and all that stuff. Justices Jackson and Sotomayor dissented. Jackson writing, and she was angry. Not about the merits of the case, but about what are we doing? What are we doing here? This is not our business yet. This is a big deal, Pete. The court is just is thrusting itself in places it never has before.
Make it more serious in terms of, all right, I'm always lowering the bar in terms of the news and the developments. And I think, how exactly does that impact the country, the planet, my community, me, my family? So this woman says something terrible, offensive about trans people. They censure her. They suspend her. Then the Supreme Court steps in and says, you can't do that, state, Maine. So what, Eric? Let me just let that go. I don't care if the court's going to step in and tell a state they can't reprimand somebody. It's awful. I don't like it. I wish they weren't doing it. It doesn't seem right the way you describe it, certainly. But what is that setting a precedent for the court to do with other states' rights that might have more consequence in my life or my community, my family, the country, whatever?
It's a great question, Pete. This one isolated instance, if this happened 15 years ago, would have been like, oh, the court lost its mind for a moment. Who cares? Even 8 years ago. It is another brick in the wall of just one of the main themes of the Roberts Court, which is we get to decide everything at all times. It's all up to us. We get to decide everything. And this plays out in incredibly important ways, like the disqualification case, where the court took the issue and said, we're deciding this for everybody for all time. That affected you a lot, believe me. During COVID, when the governors of California and other states were trying really hard during an emergency to figure out the space between shutting things down and free expression and religious freedom, those were all really hard issues, Pete, during an emergency, and we elect people to deal with it. And that's when this started. The court started intervening in cases before the cases were done on this sole emergency basis. That's not our system. And by the way, in 1983, the people who would have been criticizing this would have been Republicans and conservatives who would have said, let the cases, if it's a true emergency, okay. But that's very rare. What this is doing is it's cutting off fact-finding, it's cutting off lower court proceedings, and it's funneling everything to the court on an untimely basis. So we get, and of course, Steve Vladeck has written all about this on the shadow docket, we get no explanations or very poor explanation. This case has no explanation to it, Pete. So they basically, if you believe in states' rights and you believe that New York State should have the right to run its schools the way it wants to, and someone gets offended by something and the court swoops in on an emergency basis, it matters a lot. And this is something the court never used to do. Like the Warren Court almost never did this. It's now becoming common, and the justices have a hard enough time, I think somebody wrote this once, acting like a court, when you also give them this ability to swoop in before the facts are settled and the lower courts have looked at it. It's really bad. And especially when the Supreme Court is basically running a Fox News operation, it gets even worse.
By the way, I'm just thinking as you're talking there, it's one of the reasons why your voice is so important is because you understand the history of the Supreme Court in our lifetime. And you can educate us as to when something is unprecedented that the court is doing. And we know, because we've been talking to you forever, that you have the credibility and trust that this is not a bias of yours. That's a fact. Like the court did or did not do this thing forever or a long time. So to see the court in this case intervening this way and to have your experience and credibility is just another great credit to why your voice is so important, and you can't stop talking even if you wanted to, because we need your perspective because you're an older con law scholar.
Thank you for all of that, my friend. First of all, it's amazing the court has changed more in my lifetime than quite possibly in the 190 years before that. Seriously. I mean, my 30 years of a law professor, 34. But going to the other thing, the court in 2000, I have to remind people that in 2018, I made a living, and 2019, going around the country saying, liberals are wrong about the Supreme Court. They're just wrong. They think the court is so much worse today. And it's not. And even when the court reverses Roe, which I predicted they would do on your show and elsewhere, I said, even that, it's just the same old Supreme Court. And I said that in the middle of the most conservative court in American history. That changed. It changed with Amy Coney Barrett. I have to get people to see this. A 6-3 Fox News majority is different than a 5-4 Fox News majority. It's really different. It allows Roberts and Barrett to play a role of pseudo-judge, of sometimes we'll give a little bit to the liberals so it's not all partisan, but everything important is partisan. Everything. And in 2018, that wasn't true because of Justice Kennedy, and before that, Justice O'Connor. And before that, Souter and Blackmun. And before that, White and Stevens, when justices did not just vote political party lines, but now they do.
Boy, that might be one of the most important minutes I've heard from you in a while, to that perspective, which is, you've said it before. I'm not sure if I've heard it quite so succinctly or put that way, but really important. And we can talk about why in a larger conversation. I want to get through a few more things. I know you have limited time today. Habeas corpus. Let's not do Latin, but it's clear that the Secretary of Homeland Security didn't know what it meant. And she was a former congresswoman, I believe. She was a former governor. And now she's, of course, the Secretary of Homeland Security. So you would think she would certainly know the simple thing that most people with an education on civics law just a little bit know. But even if you didn't know, you would probably understand what it meant in terms of your rights. So where do you want to start, or what do you want to say about the Trump administration people who are going and testifying in front of committees like this Homeland Security Senate committee yesterday, and they don't seem to understand people's rights and why they matter, why this idea has always mattered, that you can challenge. If you get told you're in trouble, you can challenge it.
There are so many things
dumbest
to say
way to
about
say
this.
it. Hey, you're in trouble. Could I ask if you – no, you can't ask any questions.
There are so many things to say about this little snippet, Pete, that are just so crazy. So first of all, it's not that she didn't know what it was. She said what she said is the exact opposite of what it is. What habeas corpus is a limit on the executive's ability to arrest people without legal cause. How do we stop, in a free country, how do we stop the president or in a state, the governor, from arresting someone just for no reason? I don't like your hair color. Go to jail. Segall, I hate the fact that you hate the Celtics. Go to jail. Whatever. What stands between that and a free country is habeas corpus. What she said was it allows the president to deport people whenever he wants to. It's the opposite. She viewed it as a tool of presidential power as opposed to a limit on presidential power. Now, I trust that she really didn't know what it meant. So she could have said, and this gets to the really important part of this, Pete, she could have said to the committee, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a law professor. I never pretended to be. Pardon me for not knowing the literal definition of habeas corpus. Now, we would have made fun of her for that, right? That still would have been a bad thing. But what it would have revealed was some humanity and some ability to appreciate one's weaknesses. Instead, she does what all Trump appointees do. She went 180, became very dogmatic, very smug about an issue she knows absolutely nothing about, when her job is to know everything about that issue, Pete. Yeah. Her job is to weigh the needs of the country against the freedom of people. That's her job. So that's really terrible. And then it gets to the largest point of all, which you and I discussed ad nauseum in 2016, and which I tried to spread in various outlets, I think including the New York Times at one point, when I said that Trump is the very first president ever to have never served a second in the government or in the military. Now, the response to that by so many people, even some people on the left, was, Eric, you don't get it. We want to break everything down, right? We want to tear everything down. So no one is better to do that than someone coming from the outside, to which I said, that's a reasonable position if the person coming in has some awareness of anything. But that's not a reasonable position for Donald Trump, because all he understood from the day his father was served by the Nixon administration with a lawsuit that you're discriminating on the basis of race in your rental apartments. From that moment forward, Donald Trump hated government. He hates government. Even Ronald Reagan distrusted government come 1980. He never hated government.
If you're gonna psychoanalyze him, we've all been doing this for over 10 years now. The easier way to put it is he does not want anybody to tell him what to do, that there are any rules about anything around what you can do, where you can build a building, whether or not it should get a tax abatement, what ingredients you can put in the cement, anything about your loans, your financing for the building or your business. And I think there's a ton of Americans, certainly there's a thread or a strain of MAGA, that also doesn't like to be told what to do by anybody, which is why they own their own businesses and drive Ford F-150s. Moving on.
Hey, wait, I do want to give an analogy, okay? Because I've been thinking about it a lot. So imagine a family of four that's truly dysfunctional, like truly dysfunctional. There's emotional abuse, there's physical abuse, but they all kind of want to get along and they just don't know how to do it. And so they seek help. I understand the position that you wouldn't seek help from similarly situated families that failed. I get that. But you wouldn't seek help from someone who's never, ever been a parent. You would never do that because they would have no ability to deal with the complexity of being a parent. Yeah. We hired someone who wants to destroy it all to fix it and who has no experience in fixing it and who views himself as the victim of it his entire life. It's the world's craziest thing that's happening. And Pete, you made a joke earlier about me not talking anymore. The non-personal side of that is whatever's going to bring us back from this, I just don't think it's going to be lawyers, law professors, law. I don't think it's going to be law related.
You're talking about the nuance required to understand an issue or just make decisions. But I think that your expertise and the understanding of our history and our values and the way that laws play, it matters so much. Sometimes I think like you or a police officer or even a physician, anybody who has a specialty, they see a lot of bad stuff or they know the outcome of how things shake out. It gives you a biased view that prevents you from seeing the whole forest. And in your case, like
I agree with that. Pete, I do agree with that.
The rule of law is something that you have a deep understanding for and people in your lane do, but most of us don't. And then, by the way, if I do have an understanding of it because you taught me it in one of our conversations, I forget it. It's so important that we continue to talk about a society and a civilization that has a certain standard and that has had a certain standard to remind people, because it's very easy, I'm learning, which is what's so great about the podcast and the community and our Hangouts, is to lose yourself in a different reality. Is this happening? Did he just say that? Can they do that? It's important that we connect to remind each other, no, you can't do that. Yes, he did say that. It's not a joke. And here's what we should do about it. Or at least, even if we can't do it, even if we lose everything, here's how we should feel about it.
Well, I was just before we came on the pod, I was watching a TikTok. Apparently, the Republicans want to lessen or reduce or end taxes on tanning beds.
Tanning beds.
Yes, they want tanning beds to be cheaper and more available, and tanning bed owners to have more profits. And that's obviously a silly, stupid, small thing. Except it's not. With all the suffering going on, with cutting Medicaid, with cutting all of the programs that America needs. As a really dear friend of mine died from ALS at 72, and it was a horrible decade of horribleness. And they want to cut funding for ALS research and all this stuff. At a time when all of that is happening, and they want to take time out to worry about tanning bed salons, it's really hard.
You're saying, given the perspective and seeing, watching
watching my country do this is really hard.
The markup of this reconciliation bill is representative of the morality of the people marking it up.
Yeah.
And the idea that a lot of Americans buy the phrase work requirement. Yeah. Work requirement. There's a work requirement for you to get health insurance. I wish people would sit with that for a while. Work requirement. I agree. Because none of the rest of the world has a work requirement for health insurance. It's you better get up and go make some shit right now. If you think, by the way, probably while you're making that shit, you're going to sustain a long-term injury or impingement that you're going to need, but inadequate health care for at best. But it's such a gross work requirement. So yes, no, it's all right. Let me ask you this here at the end. We talked before last week's arguments on birthright citizenship and, more importantly, whether or not lower courts can have nationwide injunctions. We had a great conversation about it because you inserted all the nuance which is required and a lot of the maybes and a lot of the different gradations of that conversation, which I think were important. We haven't talked to you since we heard the arguments. You had the best take, as is often the take, which is even if the court decides 7-2 against this, it's up to Pam Bondi. The court doesn't have a military, I think was basically the take. So what did you think of the argument, and make that point better than I did?
Yeah, the best point I can make, Pete, I think, is to compare it to something else. Pardon me. I promise I will get right back to the question. In 2008, there was a real open question. Do non-American citizens in Guantanamo Bay have the right to habeas corpus? That was the question. Traditionally, aliens only have habeas corpus rights if they're in America. Everybody in America. By the way, back then, the overwhelming assumption about everybody was if you're on American soil, you have habeas corpus. Justice Scalia said that. Everybody. Doesn't matter if you're a citizen or not, if you're on soil. But the question was, what if you're not on American soil? What if America kidnapped you in Afghanistan, brought you to Guantanamo Bay, now you're not, which belongs to Cuba technically. And the big issue was, do they get habeas corpus?
Yeah.
And I predicted correctly that they would rule 5-4, with Justice Kennedy going with the liberals, that they would find that they have habeas corpus rights. And they did, in a really great opinion, Pete, in a really good opinion that explained why America just can't put people in safe houses around the world and then deny them habeas corpus. That's just not a thing we should do. It was a great decision. And the court never enforced it. And it got so bad that the non-enforcement got so bad that the D.C. Court of Appeals, which was all those cases ended up going to the D.C. Court of Appeals, they were confused. They were flummoxed. The court gave them no guidelines. The court never granted cert again and still hasn't to this day in any Guantanamo case, where several judges on the D.C. Circuit, they ended up saying almost nobody gets out because they didn't want to release terrorists. And they didn't know what the legal standards were, and the court would never tell them. So several lower court judges wrote to the Supreme Court basically and said, you're not doing your job. You gave us this great case in 2008 and said nothing since. We need more guidance. We need more backbone. We need this and that. And the court never did. So this argument that happened last week, if the court does decide 7-2 that emergency injunctions are sometimes appropriate. And in the case of deportations, everybody gets due process and the rule of law. Whatever the court does over this term on those issues, unless they either find a way to enforce it themselves, which is unlikely, or Congress gets in the game, then of course, who's going to trust Trump and Biondi to follow the court's orders? They've already flagrantly violated it. Get this guy back from El Salvador, the court said. Facilitate his trip back. And they haven't done it, and they double speak. They're like, we're complying with the court order. Are you bringing him back? No, we're never going to do that. Are you complying with the court order? Yes. Are you bringing him back? No, we're never going to do that. That's like saying, I have 2 children, I have 4 children. It doesn't make any sense. So my point here is, the big point is the American people, and especially important media people, political actors and members of Congress and local governors need to understand this is not going to end by the Supreme Court. It might end because they shoot themselves in the foot. It might end because MAGA deconstructs. Trump may die. The American people might come to their senses. All of that might happen.
Right.
But we need a strategy to get there that does not include the partisan Republican subcommittee that we call the Supreme Court of the United States.
I notice you did not mention nuclear holocaust or Jesus' return. Let me just ask you this at the end. I know you got to go, and I wish I had the clip ready, but I'm not that savvy yet. You've seen the discussion generally, and I think they've made a legal argument, or specifically regarding Marco Rubio yesterday, the Secretary of State, and everything else. He's doing everything. He's National Security Advisor. He's head of USAID, the archives. He's also a greeter.
I think he's playing shooting guard for the Knicks, too.
She's a shooting guard for the Knicks because his ears are so big that they set picks.
No, I mentioned that because of Trump's continual discussion of his height during the 2016 primary.
Oh, that's right. Never forget how terribly he treated Marco Rubio and his family, and how horrible Marco Rubio spoke about him. And now that's let bygones be bygones, apparently. So there's this legal argument that the courts can't tell the president, specifically, I guess in this case, the Secretary of State, the State Department, how to conduct foreign policy. Do I have that right? Are you familiar with? Have you heard this argument?
That's what people are saying, but it makes no sense.
I don't think it makes sense either, and I feel smart.
Let's drive right to the heart of it. It's 1952.
Yeah.
President Truman is like best friends with the entire Supreme Court. He plays poker with them. They're all Democrats. The Korean War is going on, and there's going to be a nationwide strike. And President Truman does not want to use certain tools available to him to get rid of the strike, which he could have done, but then it would have alienated labor, which he didn't want to do. So he goes out, he basically announces to the world, this strike can't happen because our boys and girls in Korea will die if we don't have steel for guns and tanks. So he eventually seizes the nation's steel mills, which had happened 3 times in World War II, 15 years earlier, and says, I have to run these steel mills for a few years or for a limited time because otherwise our boys and girls are going to die.
The government, the federal government has to take over the steel mills, or else we will lose the war and Americans will die in battle.
Private companies. The private companies don't like this for obvious reasons. They go to the courts in 3 months, goes from lower court to Supreme Court on an emergency basis, at the time one of the quickest ever to get to the Supreme Court. And a totally Democratic Supreme Court, Truman's a Democrat, tells him, no, you can't do that. You cannot seize private property in times of war. Only Congress can do that. Congress has that power, not you. And by the way, Truman had said, if Congress acts, I will step down. If Congress uses their authority, which they should, I'll go away. But until Congress does, so he wasn't acting as a tyrant. He wasn't saying, I'm doing this no matter what. He said, until Congress acts, I have to defend our boys and girls. So the court gets involved in foreign policy all the time. In the Roberts Court, they basically... Presidents Bush and Obama both said Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel and we can't do certain things, and the court decided that case. The court gets involved in foreign policy all the time. So it's not true to say the court can't dictate to the State Department what they do about foreign policy. What is true is the court can only do that when the Secretary of State acts unconstitutionally, like President Truman was doing in the Korean War, allegedly. So the issue always is the government acting unconstitutionally. If it is, the court gets to act in our system of government. If it's not, the court doesn't. Now, one last thing. If the case is close, this may be unconstitutional, it may not, then it's certainly fair to say, as the court has said, in areas of foreign policy where the issues are close, we're going to defer, obviously, to the political branches to make these decisions if it's a close case. But the court thought President Truman was acting unconstitutionally. It thought Congress was acting unconstitutionally about Jerusalem and Israel. When it thinks that, it tells them what to do all the time on a regular basis.
So it's a dumb argument.
Puffery. It's stupid puffery. It's just dumb. But then we have the Secretary of the Treasurer, the Director of the IRS, testify yesterday. He was asked the question, can the president order you to remove tax-exempt status from a nonprofit?
That's right.
This is real important, Pete. He said, I don't know. And the congressman was, what do you mean you don't know? You're the secretary. You run all this. What do you mean you don't? I don't know if the president can do that or not. Of course the president can't do that. There are rules that say the president can't do that. Pete, we don't have you know what's really happening? We don't have a working government. And the fix for that is not the courts. It is the Congress. I don't understand why Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, they're watching their power go away every single day. I don't understand
Just underscoring, that was the guy named Billy Long.
Yeah.
This IRS, he's Trump's pick for IRS.
Yeah.
And Trump wants to remove, the tiny king, our king, wants to remove the nonprofit status of any organization he decides.
Yes.
And that would be bad. Why?
Because the ACLU and Planned Parenthood will lose their tax-exempt status, and Fox News will be granted it. I'm kidding about Fox News, but you understand, Pete, so much of public policy work in this country on both sides is done by public interest groups. It was the NAACP under the leadership of Thurgood Marshall that got Brown versus Board reversed. It wasn't the Supreme Court. It was a 30-year social movement from tax-exempt organizations. What will happen is all the tax-exempt organizations on the right will keep their status, and all the ones on the left will lose it. That's what's going to happen.
And that obviously just means that they would have a very hard time funding these organizations because people – I know how many of these I've hosted where rich people come to alleviate their conscience by giving money away, which actually just lowers their taxable income anyway. So
before we go, can I ask you a question? Can we switch roles for 1 second?
Sure.
So Trump did a tweet 2 days ago, I think, that he doubled down on it, I think today, that threatens investigations of Bruce Springsteen and what's her name?
Beyonce and Hillary and anybody who performed at fundraisers for Democrats.
Here's my serious. It's a silly. We're in a land of silly and serious. Like we can't. You're so good at that. It's like your core strength. It's not mine. If he went after Bruce Springsteen with everything he had, if he put Bruce Springsteen on trial, what would happen?
I think he has gone after universities and law firms and networks with, quote, everything he has. And I think we're seeing what's happening there in terms of they make compromises, they bend the knee.
University presidents resign, Pete.
Yeah, so you've seen the actual consequences that are short-term that seem pretty bad. I think the longer-term consequences of that are bad. I think going after a specific person is not a generally good idea for the empire, because what they're doing is they're making that person famous. And if that person is someone that has a lot of supporters, in this case entertainers with millions of fans around the world, bad for them. They look like the empire, which is why I think
so my question is, I've talked about this on your show.
It's the kind of thing that motivates people to do stuff and to get in the streets because it draws a tremendous amount. When you cross over into the TikTok world where people that are apathetic and young people are now forced to be engaged on something and have something to maybe, in this case, go out in the streets for and fight for. It's like them arresting this black Congresswoman McIver. That was a dumb idea, I think. I think they're testing the boundaries, and I think that was a bad idea. They've just made her famous. And
So I want to use – thank you for that in the minute we have left. So I want to use all of that, Pete, to circle back to a discussion your audience will know that we've had for 10 years. So let's take my wife's cousins, who boycotted our who boycotted our wedding because we didn't want gifts. So we said, in lieu of gifts, and we listed 3 charities.
Oh, yeah.
And one was Planned Parenthood. And my wife's cousins are evangelical true believers in Michigan who boycotted our wedding because we made Planned Parenthood one of the 3 charities that you could give to. Lynn and I met during a Planned Parenthood event, so it was very close to us personally. Anyway, and Lynn was very close to these people. So this was very disappointing. Here's my question. So my memory is, so let's take hypothetically that despite these people's traditional evangelical values, they're huge Springsteen fans, which they might be.
Yeah.
I think in 2019, if Trump goes after Bruce Springsteen in the most public way possible and really threatens his freedom and his liberty, I think people like them are spread out all across America would go through the following analysis. This is terrible. I don't think Bruce Springsteen should be in jail. I really don't. But abortion. That's how my wife's but abortion.
Yeah.
The abortion part is over. And the only thing I want to say is the longest extended and indirect I told you so, not to you, to the world of all time, is I said in 2000, that if we get rid of abortion as an issue, which is the most near and dear issue to my heart, with 3 daughters, I am pro-choice as radically as it can be. But if we can take this out of this scheme for a temporary period of time, then we can make progress on every other issue liberals care about. So what I'm hoping is with abortion out of the way, if he keeps going after these crazy things and doing these crazy things, and if this administration becomes the oligarchy we know it's going to become, maybe the absence, if we have true and fair, let me put this, I am convinced that in the next true and fair election, the Democrats would win overwhelmingly. And that's a result of abortion not being part of that debate. That's all I was saying for 25 years. You did a great debate with Mike Dorf and I. Mike Dorf, who is 5 times smarter than I am. I blogged for him. He's an incredibly brilliant law professor. This is the only thing we disagreed about. He disagrees with me about this. Oh, well, he's wrong. He's wrong.
The problem with people who say, I predicted this would happen, is they think that the other things they predict will happen are going to happen, especially when you're right a lot. And I think that's an error because you just don't know. You don't know. Yeah. I think your political analysis of that proves, obviously history proves you're right. You gained a tremendous amount of respect in the legal canon as a result of being, I think, about that. And people have come to more of your views. And so you may be right about future things. I hope you're not, because you are doom and you are often gloom.
Well, no, I hope I'm right that we have free and fair elections again. Because if we do, I think we're going to get – I'm feeling optimistic about the world if we have actual fair elections.
One of the most interesting things about elections in America, if you follow the history of American politics the last 20 to 30 years particularly, is that Republicans' ideas are so radical, a vast majority, and people know what they are, the vast majority of Americans wouldn't like them. And so they stopped winning elections. They couldn't win elections. So they had to do everything they could to load the decks. And we never just review that history, but it's so important, from campaign finance to gerrymandering to making it harder to vote for certain people. And that's just the beginning of the list, but those are the big 3. They have made elections. They don't have ideas. They can't win on the ideas. So they have to make it harder for people that don't like their ideas to vote and to win, not to mention the Electoral College. It's just something that we could almost begin and start every conversation with, reminding people in politics.
And make it about personality, which is what they've done.
For sure. We could talk about the conversations and the trans thing. It's like the worst thing for Democrats ever. They're still
So I want to interrupt by saying this. I am Dr. Doom and Gloom, but for Tina and others out there, what I said 5 minutes ago, I want to emphasize. If we have fair elections, I think this will come to an end. So I think the work has to be what Mark Elias is doing and others. Everything has to go into somehow getting a fair election in 2026.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that's. I mean, that's above my pay grade.
And making sure we have good candidates, and not like the other criticism I've made, which is becoming less controversial, is that really old people should not be serving in public office. You shouldn't sign a contract for a new job in the government when you're 79. You can go run an accounting firm. You can go run Walmart. You can do whatever you want, but you don't get to be mayor or governor if you're 79. You work for us. You can't. This guy, Jerry Connolly, just died today. He died today. It was like a few months ago that they had this huge argument over whether he or AOC, who's clearly the future of the progressive movement, much less the Democratic Party, should be in office. You got to go. Sorry.
Most countries deal with this so differently. I'm not talking about China here, but most other countries, they let young people rule the country. But the difference is they really respect their elders and they seek advice and counsel.
Both can. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. That's the sweet sauce right there.
Yes. It's like you and me.
Exactly. Who's the sweet sauce?
I just think that all men, my best advice to all 45 and up men is make friends with other men 10 to 15 to as many years older as you can. And there's this in the most serious way. You and my friend who I hike with every Wednesday, just left, have given me so much wisdom and advice and things to think about and perspective. It's just such a great value to have you in my life for that reason alone. Forget your legal scholar stuff. So thank you for that, and I will let you go.
Thank you, my friend. And I've already droned on your show too often how much you changed and improved my career.
All right, that's it. Let's kiss.
And life.
All right, love you, buddy. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
All right, you leave. I'm going to keep talking.
Goodbye.
All right. All right, there you go. There he goes, Eric Segall. Go support him on all the ways. Follow him on Blue Sky. That's the best place. That's where he's mostly posting on social media. Also, he's got a TikTok account. And check out the podcast, get the books, and he will be joining us at a Hangout, I'm sure, soon. You can ask him questions for yourself. Always love when he joins us. Always love when you join us, you bumblebees. Here at the end, I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout. Thank you very much to John Carroll, who writes and performs all the music for this program. He is a award-winning singer-songwriter, and he's got a new album out. Go to johncarroll.org right now. Order it, download it, listen to it, enjoy it. And I will talk to you tomorrow, or later today, or some other time. Love you. Thank you. Good luck today, everybody.
I think you drive